Before the next episode of X Job Downloaded starts, I have a big favour to ask. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes so far, please can you click on the follow button on your platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon and YouTube. It costs nothing to follow, but makes a real difference to me as a podcast producer. Thank you. This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Maliri and this is X Job Downloaded. now today I'm interviewing. I haven't done anything wrong. now you understand the significance of that. Today I'm interviewing Simon Rogers. Now Simon is a former police officer with Warwickshire Police. He's an advisor to the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh and also runs Turret Training Limited. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. So do you like the introduction?
Yeah, it was okay. I've never had an introduction like that, so that'll go with me fine.
It's funny because our military friends who I interview, they don't understand the significance of the of that part. So, but you wait to the end. There's another bit at the end of it.
Right, okay.
So, where did it all begin for Simon, and what's Simon all about, and how did we get to where we are?
Oh, I hate talking about myself, but in a nutshell, so did 30 years in the police service, Warwickshire, a regional unit in bits and pieces. During my career, I got into firearms, specialised in that area, became a national firearms instructor, held a number of portfolios, retired after 30 years, didn't know what to do effectively. So my father suggested I set up a little company, applying some of my hard-earned experience and skills within the commercial world.
Yeah,
I never even thought of it then. So the transition from policeman to businessman, if you like, has been a huge learning curve for me because it's just so totally different in so many different ways. So I set up Turret Training, which effectively looks after delivery of specialised trauma, pre-hospital trauma care in the commercial sector, and also has another specialist wing around major incident, critical incident management through JESSA protocols and stuff like that. Right. So that's what my little company does with my team.
Right, okay. Well, I'm going to take you back. So you joined Warwickshire Police in what year?
1989.
1989. Not a bad year. But things were different in the police service then, weren't they?
Yes. Yeah.
Much different.
It was just coming out of, PACE had just recently been introduced, hadn't it? So
yeah.
There's a lot of change aside, and we used to parade with truncheons and pocketbooks at 6 o'clock in the morning, and your sergeant would sign and then you go off to your accoutrements and your patrol location, and you'd walk the beat.
Yeah.
And you used to wear a tunic. So there's been a huge transition and change. So that's how it started.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because I joined just before that and we were coming out of the Life on Mars era. You had all these people, because if you look at it from a broad brush perspective, 1989, you would have been joining as somebody from 1959 was just retiring.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was very much Life on Mars.
Yeah, it was. And they didn't get the way that policing was going, in the same way that I probably don't get how policing is going today. So if I walk through the door, I've been retired 7 years. If I walk through the door today, I would be totally lost, I suppose. It's the same ethos, same sort of thoughts around it. But where did you go for your basic training?
So I went to Brighton Police Training College, which is now the College of Policing, one of the hubs here.
Yes.
In Warwickshire. So I was lucky enough not to go to Chantmarl, which was down south. It was miles away.
Yeah.
But I went to Brighton on Dunsmore in Warwickshire, so I was quite fortunate there. And I was there for 3 months. So it was quite militaresque in its approach. Lots of physical fitness and running and evening parades, morning parades, showcase uniform, and you had your sergeant coming in inspecting your rooms with white gloves and stuff. So it was quite interesting. I mean, it was quite militaresque. So that's
But I think that set you out in the right way. I mean, I don't mean to be disparaging, but I watched a clip of 24 Hours in Custody the other day, and there's a young officer on there who had a full-on Mohican and looked like he was an extra from a Clash concert or exploited concert. You know, and do you know what? I sound like my dad, and I say that on a regular basis, but if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. But I want somebody that I can respect when they walk through the front door.
Yes. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, isn't there, in terms of developing that sort of internal discipline and a collective discipline around what we do. There's been a lot of change, hasn't there? So, you know, I know when you retired, they used to sit down around chairs and have a conversation and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is okay, but is it or isn't it? I don't know, but it was a bit weird.
And there's certainly no working from home.
No.
Which is happening on a regular basis now. So where was your first posting? Where did you first go to?
I went to Rugby. So it was a satellite station right in the middle of the county. So I walked the beat for 3 years. It should have been 2, but it was just shy of 3. And learnt my trade craft there, and then got in those days you used to get recommendations for driving courses and car courses. That's right. Didn't you? So I was doing all right, and I sorted myself out. So they gave me a recommendation for an area car course, and that was in 1992.
Right.
So that's where it went, and I started getting into advanced driving and stuff.
Did you stay at Rugby until you went on the firearms team?
God, no. I actually tried to get onto the firearms early doors, but they told me I was too young and didn't have enough experience, and needed to perhaps, shall I say, reduce the passion of what I was doing.
yeah, I know that goes. I never carried the gun because I never got rid of that. But yeah.
So 1993, I moved off. Got my recommendation for an advanced ticket, and in those days you didn't have traffic, local, etc. So you had to go off. So I went on to a thing called a Southern Area Traffic, which was a bit of a hybrid between the beat as it was then, and then response to major incidents and stuff on the motorways and various truncated road systems. And because we had the bigger cars, we could tend to get to immediate responses fairly quickly. So that started my sort of process around developing the career, because I got the advanced ticket. So that was part of becoming a firearms officer, is being able to drive the armed response vehicles. So that's how it went. So 1993, went on to the Southern Area Traffic area. And then I think I applied for firearms, got through, failed the course, missed the shot, dropped it by 1 round, apparently. I mean, I thought it was a 9mm pencil, but there you go.
Yeah.
But the following year I reapplied and got on. So 1998, that was the start of my illustrious career.
And what's the training like? Because people don't understand how much work goes into just the initial selection process, because not everybody passes. No. So it's an inordinate amount of stuff. So you have to step through quite a lot of selection and recruitment criteria. There's a lot of background checks, a lot of assessments and referrals from your immediate supervisors and your immediate commanders on your divisional areas before you even get through to the process where you get into selection and recruitment. So you've got to get through all those steps. You've got to have a clean background, no ongoing inquiries or anything else. Once you get through there, then there's a medical fitness. Then there's either anything from a 2 to a 5-day selection process, depending on the home forces you're in. And then that's all about, the use of force, how you interpret it, your knowledge around that, and how you act under
pressure and stress, really.
Yeah.
So that's that sort of pressure test. That's a 2 to 5 day selection criteria. If you get through that and you're successful, then you can go on to, it's now 14 weeks.
Wow.
In my time, it used to be 8 weeks, and then you had another bolt on for 2 weeks with different types of weapons and stuff. So it was 10 weeks in those days. But now it's a criteria of 14 weeks. But over that period of time, it's a continual assessment, and you can fail at any point on that course. It's quite pressurized, and it's designed to be. So you have to pass shoots. I think there's generally 3 shoots on a course, and they are to a marksmanship level. So you have to hit 90% at every type of weapon. And then there's lots of tactics around how you apply them, how you interpret them. After that, then there's the medical side of things, et cetera, et cetera. It just goes on from there, really. So it's pretty intense.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've got a number of friends, as you imagine, who've been through it, and it's hard to digest the amount of work that goes into it. And there's an irony, because and I don't mean this in a disparaging or disrespectful way to my firearms colleagues, but they're the fittest people in the police service, yet they spend more time in the cars than any. And then you've got the bobbies that are out and about chasing people around, and they make me look slim these days.
It is weird, isn't it? It's a real juxtapose. I get it. It's just nuts.
Yeah, because the bleep test is, was it 8.7 for firearms officers?
It was. I think it was 8.6. Then it was 9.4 for armed response vehicles, and then I think it's 10.5 for close protection onwards.
Wow. And then your beat bobbies, I understand they're dropping it something like 3.8 or something like that.
You can just walk.
Oh, yeah. I could pass that with my eyes closed.
So I don't know why they're changing the goalposts there, but they have. But what's really interesting is, as a tail end of my sort of firearms career, there was sort of movement afoot to try and look at tailoring the fitness test and stuff. And actually, with all the things that have been going on nationally, they kept it and actually have enhanced it. And there's a greater expectation for that level of fitness to continue. I mean, even when I retired at 53, I was still passing the fitness test 10.5. Wow. That was an expectation. So, and I've always found that those sort of people that are on it always want to do it because they volunteer for it. So they naturally want to keep fit because they want to make sure that they can do what they can do.
And that's really interesting you say about the volunteer element, because the current climate around firearms officers, my hat goes off to anybody that wants to carry a gun.
Yeah. Anybody
that is prepared to face the level of scrutiny that they will face should there be any form of discharge of a weapon, whether it's fatal or not. Yeah. The scrutiny is overwhelming. There's no other business in this country that faces that level of scrutiny.
No, absolutely, and it can go on for years. And as you and I know, and certainly some of our previous colleagues and currently serving have experienced this issue around continual scrutiny. And I suppose there's that mental toughness as well that you need to maintain that. Scrutiny. So it's phenomenal, and actually I've never found that replicated out in the commercial sector per se. It's quite interesting, but there's a hell of a lot. Having been involved in certain things, these things can go on for a long time, so you do question yourself sometimes.
Did you ever get called in, because you went on to be the firearms instructor, lead firearms instructor? Did you get called in to scrutinise other police forces once it'd been
Yes, not actually called into them, but you would oversee some of the tactical firearms logs. So if you had a tactical police firearms advisor give some advice to an incident or an operation from another force, sometimes we would get exposed to what's your professional opinion, an expert opinion on this, and so you would have a look at that as well. So again, that's the level of scrutiny around. The national decision-making model and stuff like that.
And I mean, people say, "Oh, well, it's in-house scrutiny," but the fact is that they do have an ability to scrutinise themselves because they will say it as they see it, and not there's very rarely, and it does happen, and we've seen it in some forces, but very rarely is it without fear or favour. But what was the inspiration to become a firearms instructor? Because you're just loading even more pressure on yourself within the workplace.
I'd always been doing some training within the police service, and I just felt it was a natural progression. I was a self-defense OST instructor.
Yep.
Yeah. And I just thought, well, I was told I was pretty good at doing this stuff, so I thought, well, I really enjoyed the firearms and the tactics and stuff, and I thought, well, I got to a point where I was respected, and I thought, well, I'll give it a go, because I really enjoyed it, and I thought I could just help make a difference, enhance the capability, and really make an impact on the team, I suppose. So that's where it went, and I went through the process, again, quite a challenging sort of selection process to become an NFI. So the rest is history, I suppose. They sent me off to where the bloody hell did they go? Blackpool. I went up to Lancashire.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, exactly. 6-7 weeks up there, and they basically took my brain out and reconstituted it and put it back in. And then from then on, I was an NFI and started learning the trade.
That's a hell of a job, though, isn't it? I mean, like you say, the legislation that's wrapped around it, and when if there is a weapons discharge, etc., the scrutiny comes to you because you're the one who's delivered the overall package, the overall training.
Yeah.
So if someone gets shot, they'll be saying, "Oh, well, what happened as part of your training?" And it's quite intrusive.
Well, it's hugely intrusive. You've got to be open to that sort of scrutiny in your personal life, let alone your professional life. And you've got to accept that is part of the process. There's a lot of stuff that you have to sacrifice. And I suppose if the reward is what you do, and that's how you get it back, I suppose. But, I mean, for me, involved in a number of major incidents, but of course running firearms ranges is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And we had 4 shootings, accidental discharges on ranges. So you can just imagine the scrutiny.
Wow.
Whilst you was the range commanding officer, as I was, an RCO as it was called, things go wrong, and has happened in the past, and will continue to do so because you're using live ammunition. So
that's not 4 within Warwickshire, is it? That's 4 nationally.
No, 4 within Warwickshire.
Wow.
But these things happen because you have weapons malfunctions, weapons handling malfunctions. Sometimes ammunition will ricochet off parts of the range which you'd never even thought that would do that, and they come flying back to you. So then you have to start thinking about, right, okay, how safe is this and stuff? Yeah. So not only is the training testing and challenging, it also is quite dangerous as well. But then that's the job you're in.
That's life, isn't it? That's how it goes. Yeah, of course it is. How many firearms officers do Warwickshire have, or did they have?
Currently, it's a small force, but which punches above its weight. So it's got about 30 odd, 32 at the moment. And the beauty of Warwickshire is that they are a dual role, a single solution capability. So they have a lot of skills portfolios to do a lot of job roles. So like you'll have operational firearms commanders on the car. You'll have tactical advisors available on the vehicles. You'll have close protection officers. So there's a lot of multiple hatting, which is great because actually the skill set of the officers really is enhanced and developed. So there's a small team.
Because you border onto the West Midlands, you've got the NECs right on the border. Yep. In fact, is the NEC part of that in Warwickshire, or is it all?
No, it's West Midlands. But that was the beauty with Warwickshire. There was a lot of respect between the two forces because West Midlands is obviously the second biggest, or was, firearm deployment team in the country, and we had a lot of operational exposure with them with the various truncated road networks, M6, etc. So we did quite a lot of work with the West Mids, Vicky Verkey. So they respected us and appreciated that actually we were very, very competent at what we did.
Yeah.
So we have the regional area along with West Mercia, Staffordshire, Leicestershire, and West Mid. So we were pretty busy for a small force.
Well, yeah, because the national infrastructure is such that with the strategic road links that go through Warwickshire, travelling criminals, they don't look at boundaries. There are no boundaries in their lives. Right. So they'll quite happily run a gun up from London into Birmingham and come through Warwickshire.
Yeah, and they certainly did do that.
Yeah.
Coventry, hopping across.
Yeah,
oh, yeah,
absolutely.
But there was a lot of exposure for our ARVs, and they became very, very good at what they were doing, and still continue to this day because there was a lot of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because the public don't realise how much work goes into the day-to-day policing, protecting them as members of the public.
Yeah.
How many qualifying shoots would an officer have to undertake in a year?
So it's a minimum of 3. Warwickshire do 4 currently, I'm led to believe. So they step above the standard, but it's a minimum of 3 qual shoots on the various weapons platforms that you do. So that can be anything from the generic G36, which is the long carbine weapon, the pistols, the Glock 17, some other weapons are used. There's the AEP, which is the rubber bullet one. It's like a big rubber bullet which they designed over in the Northern Ireland for various things. And then you've got other things like different types of weapons platforms depending on different roles you've got. And then there's the rifle officers. They are snipers, but then they're termed rifles. So
they're no longer called snipers.
Better terminology, yeah. And I'm still led to believe, I'm not sure, but I think they are the only section in the role that is allowed to wear camouflage equipment.
Right, buffalo.
Yeah, and a hat. You know.
And buffalo suits. Other nice products are available, I'm sure. It is an interesting world. As I say, I've got a lot of mates, and I always remember, was it the Hatton gun where they'd blow the tyres off of you could blow the tyres off of a lorry?
Yeah, I used to. Yeah, that's right.
Hatton
and different types of rounds.
Yeah.
So you had to practice that as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. But of course, with that, there's always the potential of trauma, isn't there? There's always a potential of someone getting injured and shot, and so you have people trained up as medics within that field. It used to be that if you had a live firearms job, you'd have an ambulance near or by. But of course, I'm not sure how often that happens now. But you do have specialised or specially trained officers who have got that almost battlefield medics.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was the premise around firearms, because when you're in what is known as the hot zone, as you know, and for the people who don't, there's like that categories of hot, warm, and cold. So if you're in the hot zone, there's nobody else who can go into that, or that used to be a situation where it was only firearms officers because it was too dangerous. So you had your members of the public, criminal activity inside this area, and so you had to go and neutralise the threat, deal with it, contain it, and then deal with the aftermath of that. And you know, it's come to the fore in the last 10, 15 years, definitely. But there was what is known as a care gap, or a therapeutic vacuum, for getting technical, where if you had members of the public who were shot or stabbed, and you had to go and rescue them, there was a period of time where there was a delay for the grown-ups in green to attend, and the licensed professionals. So we had to be trained to a certain level and a standard to administer pre-hospital trauma care on the roadside, and often that was in what is known as non-permissive, suboptimal environments. So you had to be really, really switched on about how you delivered that type of stuff in such environments. And what you will find is that the training curriculum is predicated to operating within hostile environments, And a lot of that knowledge has come from the UK Special Forces world.
Yes.
And actually, I was involved with the College of Policing developing what is known as fast aid kits, so first aid and specialist trauma kit. And we carry those as a number of forces in the country. I think it's 26 that carry these types of kits, these trauma kits, which are designed to look after your team and then also members of the public or people who have been injured as a consequence of criminality. And they're very high-end, very specialist pieces of equipment with lots of stuff inside. So, yeah, that level of trauma was exceptional. And I found that really interesting when I first started to learn it. And that's how I got drawn into that. And I held a portfolio on a regional perspective for it.
And because the police have faced significant criticism where there's been an active shooter and the ambulance service haven't been able to get in. So I suppose that, you know, the added level of responsibility around applying emergency aid, that falls to the blue uniform. That's the bottom line.
In a nutshell, yeah, initially, there has been changes in the last 6 years around legislation around the HART teams, so there's the hazardous response teams for the ambulance service. And where they used to operate in warm zones, are now trained with police tactics, firearms tactics. They'll carry body armour and helmets. And there is a duty of care and an expectation that they will operate just on the back of the firearms teams in the hot zone. Having said that, certainly there's been stated cases in recent years where that didn't actually happen. And there's certainly one incident where firearms officers had to drag a casualty around about 100 metres from point A to B to the point where the ambulance teams were.
Right.
So I'm not decrying that at all, because they do some exceptional work, but it's just that process around the JESIP principles and the JOPs, so that's the Joint Operating Principles, and as a consequence of the Manchester Arena Inquiry and Westminster Bridge, Fishmonger, Burra Market, etc., these things are starting to be fine-tuned and they're starting to be more developed. But in essence, police firearms officers, they are at the front, they're at the sharp end, if you like, and the idea and expectation is that they will start to deliver trauma interventions, life-saving trauma interventions under care under fire circumstances, and which is something that never used to happen.
No.
You know, the pyramid changed, whereas before the idea was to go and contain and talk someone down. Now it's slightly different in relation to Operation Plato responses to terrorist threats, as was ably demonstrated on Westminster Bridge.
Yeah, and every day is a school day, isn't it? Because actually, when mistakes are made, it's easy to criticise, but from those mistakes comes significant learning. It's when those mistakes are made again, after they've had the learning, that's when the problem comes. But we're fallible. Humans are fallible. And, you know, out of the 67, 68 million people that live in this country, there are only a handful of people that have ever been involved in a frontline terrorist incident where they've had to face an attacker with a weapon. Yeah. Yeah. So really, we do remarkably well in this country for our responses. And I have this argument with, I have this discussion with my friends in the States who don't get why we don't readily carry guns. Well, why don't you carry guns? Well, because we don't. Yeah, but you're all stabbing each other. Yeah, but if we carry guns, we'd all be shooting each other. So it's, I accept that, you know, knives are bad, but you only have to look at the fact is, the chances of you and I getting stabbed as we walk through Coventry are quite slim because we're not part of a gang. We don't, you know, the demographics, our age group, all those sorts of things, we are not at risk. We could get robbed. Of course we could, because they think we're old and vulnerable, but little do they know that they'll get a punch straight in the face. But but the fact is, the chances of us being the victims of a stabbing are quite slim. You watch, I'll go and get killed tonight. But
you're right, though, statistically, that's true.
But if somebody's carrying a gun and I'm out shopping in the local shopping centre and they decide that they want to be an active shooter, I've got as much chance of getting killed as the next person. So it's absolutely right that we don't carry firearms readily in this country.
Yeah, and we have those restrictions accordingly. and it's a robust system, and it does work. And if you look at the comparison to Europe and the States, we are way above that, and still yet, in my opinion, despite all the negative press coverage and things that have been going on, I would still say that we are the finest police service in the world.
I agree.
If not second to, I don't know, some of our European brethren, definitely.
Yeah, I think the Germans. I think the European policing model's pretty good, but I do think that in the interest of fairness and inclusivity, we're right up there. And the police service today is the different to the police service that we joined in the 80s. But it does do a remarkable job. Although I can criticise it like everybody else, I get fed up with it sometimes. But it's frustrating, and you do get annoyed with some of these people that bring it into disrepute, and you think, what on earth are you doing? And then you think about the selection criterion. You had to be 5'10" when you first joined and do 30 press-ups and all this sort of stuff. But did that work? Well, probably it did, because you didn't hear about these stories recently, and you're thinking, "Oh, why are you scratching your head? Where's this going?" But the argument is that we were all misogynists and racist, and apparently so, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. I suppose if by opening a door for one of my female colleagues makes me a misogynist, then I'm guilty. But that's as good as it got. There was an expectation that everybody will work to the same standards. Were you ever involved in any incidents where there had been a discharge of a weapon?
Yes.
And so what was that like immediately after, the aftermath of that as a serving officer? What was that like?
There was always a pregnant pause, and you think, right, okay. And then you just flick a switch and you go into that training. And so you just do what you need to do. You secure the scene as an operational firearms commander or a team leader. You deal with what you've got to deal with, and you secure the scene. And then you just go through the process. I think it's the aftermath of it, when everything's settled down. It's the thinking about it, and then the initial investigation and the accountability afterwards, and that's when it starts to go.
Sure.
Because you've got those three fights on you. You versus you. You go into a job, a firearms incident, and you're thinking, right, okay. And you question your capability and your confidence, and then you get up and you rock through it, and then you've got your subject or subjects and your people. So you deal with them, and then something goes wrong. And what I mean by goes wrong, a firearm is discharged. Because ultimately, what we don't want to be doing is shooting people unless they are terrorists that are causing real problems, and that's where it's changed in terms of the pyramid. So you do 1 and 2, and then the third one is you versus the system, and so the system then comes in, and then it's an appropriate issue of integrity and accountability, and so. There's lots of stuff that is there to support you. I mean, you get your clothes taken off you depending on the severity of the incident. Yeah. Your phone's taken and checked and everything. You're thinking, right, okay, I better delete that. Well, you can't, so it's all done, Yeah. And there's that scrutiny in terms of your personal life comes to the fore again, doesn't it? So, but, that's part of the course, and that's an expectation. It should be. It certainly was for me and my team and my guys. The
IOPC, they take primacy over a discharge weapon, and then it's passed back to the local professional standards if appropriate.
Yes.
What level of training do the investigators have in relation to firearms use? So IOPC, if they send an investigator out, has that person got knowledge of firearms or
that's a great question.
Tactical use?
Certainly in my illustrious career, I was only exposed to these people, I use that phrase, it's wrong. They're not
I get it.
But coming to have an observation day to see what the tactics were and stuff. And I understand it to a degree. There needs to be that disconnect, and they have to have that sort of position where they are independent totally. But the problem with that is then they don't necessarily understand some of the nuances around the tactics and stuff. And then there's a question to say, well, do they need to carry out the investigation when they've got other experts which they can default to, like the PS, Professional Standards Department?
Yeah.
They would come on observation days or afternoons. They had a reasonable managerial expectation around what we do and what the expectations of the tactics were. And I think that if they were to seek, and they certainly did seek, professional opinion, was from an outside force for the issues about provenance and integrity. So it was a good system. It was quite robust, and I think, I don't know if it's changed much now, but the IOPC are a process where they have to ensure there's accountability, and rightly so.
Yes, and I don't disagree. My only concern is that decisions are made over a 6-month investigation, where a firearms officer had a split second to decide whether or not the person that they were dealing with was leaning into their glove box, and whether they had a torch in their hand or a 9mm Glock. And that's the thing that I find very frustrating around the way that firearms officers are dealt with.
I totally agree with you, and you see why the Metropolitan Police specialist units there were up in arms around it, literally.
Yeah.
Because there is that issue around, they're treated as criminals as opposed to victims or a person of interest, if you like.
Yeah.
And there is a process in which that should take place. I think it's getting better. I think because we volunteered for it, we don't necessarily expect that sort of treatment as such, because we're not there to go and machine gun people to death. No. It's just not like that at all. But I certainly know from my time there was a change. So when there was an incident, like a critical incident, there was an expectation that a duty statement was taken from you as a principal officer within a very short space of time.
Yeah.
But over the last decade, there's a lot of medical, psychological assessing going on and evidence with white papers saying that actually you're probably better to leave that principal officer alone for a couple of days, go back to them and have a bit of a better conversation and take a statement there. And so that's changed. And there's an expectation from the IOPC that they understand that now, where there's that sort of breathing space, because a traumatic event, the brain acts in different ways, and basically what it tries to do is to suppress those feelings. And sometimes the recounting of information is in different timelines, and it doesn't look right. So if you're writing a duty statement and then there's different levels of timings and stuff, then you're open to scrutiny about, well, are you lying here? Or why are you doing this? So actually, part of this process has been quite holistic in terms of looking after that. So you give that principal officer the ability to take some soak time, get some support, and then deliver that duty statement in I think it's about 48 hours now. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
How it is now, I don't know.
Because at the end of the day, if you look at the event itself, it's like having a bottle that contains sand, stone, oil, and water. And for those 30 seconds, it's all been shaken up, and it hasn't had the opportunity to settle. So you don't know where the different layers are. And once it's settled, life and events become a lot clearer.
Yeah. And
that seems to be lost on some members of the public. What do you think about the officers that would happily hand back their permits? This incident's going on in London with Chris Cabber at the moment. I personally, I think that the decision maker abrogated their responsibility and decided to pass it on to a jury to make that decision, because they were scared of the fallout if they came back with we're not going to prosecute this officer. I think that's probably what's happened. The danger of that is they had the power of the pen, and now they're going to empower 12 people who may have had a terrible life, where they've had encountered the police, whatever, and all of a sudden they're going to have an unconscious bias towards finding a police officer guilty. But how do you feel about the police officers that say, "Oh, we'll give back our permits"?
That's a real tough question. I think there's two schools. I support it, but then I don't. I support it because someone's got to make a stand around the way they're treated because they're volunteers. You've got to have that capability within the UK. And you can't mandate it, rightly so, because it's consent by the public, and we need to appreciate that. And I think the public need to appreciate that more about how and why and the ins and outs of what that is about. So, in one way, I think by handing in your weapons and your permits, it's a show to say, look, we're not being looked after very well. We're not in the business of going to machine gun people. We are highly trained, very, very professional individuals who take considerable responsibility around what we're doing, and this is not correct. So that should be listened to. The second point then is around protecting the public and the duty of care that we have as individuals. We took an oath. We don't have a contract of employment that we signed, do we?
No.
When we joined, we gave an oath to the Queen, which is why we're not allowed in a certain part of the Houses of Parliament, isn't it? Because we are a Crown servant. So there's an element there about, well, you know what, that's just how it is, and you've just got to take it on the chin. So there's two schools of thought. I think there needs to be more proactivity from the Police Federation of England and Wales, perhaps, in terms of supporting the AFOs in a more robust way. I don't think that's done. And I think if that was a little bit more proactive, maybe the things would change. But I certainly wouldn't advocate handing in all the permits and leaving the public to such a risk as that, because I know they were talking about bringing the military in, which is a wholly different game.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's my answer, really. It's one or the other.
Very, very well answered. So I mean, you're absolutely right. The Federation, and we're lucky here because one of the leads in the Federation is Laura Heggie in Essex. She's brilliant. She's a former firearms officer, so she knows that if anything were to happen, but I don't know how that's replicated across the country. And I don't know, and I will ask. I think it's Mark Williams from the PFOA. I'd like to get him on here,
just Mark,
because I think that whether there's enough linking between the PFOA and the Federation, I don't know. I think the Federation are all knowing, and I don't think that they engage properly with other groups, and PFOA is one of them.
I agree, and the PFOA, that was developed as a charitable foundation.
Yep.
That's crazy. We're providing subscriptions on an annual basis. That's just nuts. It shouldn't be like that.
No. And
then secondly, from my experience, like you, but the Federation, either locally or regionally or nationally, didn't have enough teeth. Sometimes it was just like
they're comfortable.
Yes,
they're comfortable.
Look,
don't get me wrong. I was on the local board, on the inspectors board.
They did some great work.
But it is the problem is once they're up there, what used to really rile me is when some of our Federation leads, and I don't know how this works across the country, would go out once a month with the chief constable and have a curry and pay for it on the subs of the Federation.
Yes. Or go on the train and get a nice first class ticket.
How is that? That's tantamount to.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I wouldn't want to say corruption, but it's not good practice.
That's a conversation in a pub.
It is, but it was the truth. That was what was happening. You can only defame somebody if you're not telling the truth, and that was the truth. There was money spent on travel, on meals, on everything else, on the company card. I get it. If they go to a hearing with an officer, or they're supporting an officer, and they buy a cup of tea, they shouldn't be expected to buy a cup of tea and a sandwich out of their own pocket. That's what you pay your subs for, but not to travel first class everywhere and hoi polloi it. But anyway, that's another story. But so we're now at the end of our service.
Yeah. What
did you do next, and how did you get to where you are today?
Oh, well, that's a journey, to be honest. very quick timeline. Left in 2019, retired. If I'm honest, lost the plot. Didn't know what to do. Fell off the cliff face. Hence why my father suggests, look, you're lost. So he suggested I create this business. So I got myself back together again after about 6 months. Unfortunately, the pub is just 147 paces away. So that was my second home, which was totally unlike me, because being on firearms, alcohol and guns just don't mix.
No.
So I didn't really drink. But when I left, I just lost the plot a bit. So I got myself together, set this little company up, and my father was just advising me accordingly. And I joined the Security Institute, the SI.
Yeah.
As was then in 2019. Rick Mountfield, do you know Rick?
No.
You heard of Rick Mountfield?
No.
So Rick at the time was the CEO, equivalent MD, and he was great because he was talking to me about the transition. So actually outside in the commercial world, there was something I never realised. There was that sort of support network, which I lost when I retired.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing there. NARPO's NARPO, but it's NARPO, isn't it? So that was that. So yeah, set up the little business, and it's gone from strength to strength. Really, when COVID hit, I lost all my contracts. So yeah, so that was a bit of a hit. But you know what? The police service taught me, you're going to hit, so you get back up again.
Resilience.
So, exactly. So I used that sort of experience, and I'm here today, having a great chat with you. And I've converted the garage into an office, and I've got a contract out in the UAE. I'm flying out the end of this month.
Nice.
And it all sounds pretty Gucci, but it's graft. I'm doing all right.
But people don't realise that wherever you travel in the world, there is an office that looks just like the office that you're sitting in. It might be sunny outside, but you've still got to work. Is Pete Lavery part of the Security Institute?
Yes.
Yeah,
Pete,
I know Pete. Yeah. Well, Pete's a former military policeman.
He is. Yeah.
And he was a Colchester-based military policeman, so I know Pete. In fact, he's been to see my band a couple of times, I think.
You've got a band?
But yeah, so I sing in the Scar band, and Pete's been to see me. We're called Scarmite, love us or hate us. But anyway, that's another story. So what do you do? What does Turret do? What's the overall emphasis around their trade?
So it's basically, most of the work is around the security industry and developing security officers to become security medics.
Right.
So the idea behind that is to develop their skill set, empower them to help people within their deployed locus. The secondary, there's lots of other add-ons to that, but based on my personal experience as a firearms commander, when I've deployed, mate, can you take this med kit? I don't know what to do with it. So for me, if this was years ago, if this person had appropriate training with this type of equipment, I could then offset that responsibility and go off and do other stuff.
Yes.
So it's about developing that security officer with security medics skill set, using my experience with regards to that, and then adding to that, supplying medical equipment, fast aid kits, if they wanted that, or giving them some advice around that, and then also providing workshops, specialist workshops about major incident management relative to the medical world of that. So if you've got people who are injured, what's the expectations of an ambulance team or an ambulance crew, commander, etc. So it's teaching them about that, and it's fine-tuning that. So the idea is to enhance the skill set of that security world to augment the statutory emergency services.
But so where do the SIA sit with this? Because that's what you've done there. You've demonstrated a very relevant and valid point, because we've been talking about knife crime earlier on.
Yes.
And you look at the inner cities, what levels of training have security staff got in the middle of Birmingham where they could, Erdington, where there could well be a stab in the middle of Coventry, Colchester, wherever it may be.
Right.
These business improvement districts, they call them bids. They must have a level of social responsibility to get their security staff trained to a point where they can apply a patch. You know, if someone gets stabbed, they can put a patch over the lung to stop it from blowing out and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But
they don't.
But they don't.
And it's you get into the real nuts and bolts of this, and I could talk and bore you to death for hours. But cut long story short, not all of the training, pre-hostile training courses are appropriate or role specific, and a lot of the training is designed around event medical interventions.
Right.
So you might have a first aider who's looking after an outdoor concert, for instance. Well, they're going to be working in a permissive environment and generic sort of first aid.
Yes.
And this is the issue around the types of courses that are available commercially, which frustrates me because the vast majority of the courses that are currently available have plagiarised what is known as the D13 section of the National Police Firearms Training Curriculum.
Right.
And D13 was the fast aid trauma skill set, which was written and designed and developed by the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, Dr. John Hall MBE, Professor Sir Keith Porter and Andy Thurgood, to name but a few. And this was written about 20 odd years ago. So people have started to plagiarise that since, and they've made it more academic, they've made it more event, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, it's about educating the SIA to say, yeah, these are really good courses, but actually, if you look at the recommendation from Sir John Saunders, he is stating that you need to train security staff that have appropriate skill set that reflects what they might have to deal with, like a Manchester, like a Westminster. And not only that, you need to give them the appropriate equipment to deal with it as well.
Yes.
But as an example, the armed response vehicles across the UK have been mandated to carry what is known as drop bags. These drop bags have trauma kit inside them, and they're designed to be dropped out for self-rescue for members of the public. Or what we could do is actually have security officers understand what's in these drop kits and actually augment the deployment. So I do know that the SIA have been directed by this John Saunders to look urgently, quote urgently, at devising a plan and liaising with the College of Policing. And that forms part of Volume 2's managed recommendations, to be fair. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm a cynical so-and-so, and I've always thought of the SIA as being a quango who, people pay, and you only have to look at the scandals recently where companies have been telling their subjects what to write as answers, etc., etc.
Yeah.
The problem I have, if we have an active shooter, it's going to be in a school, or it's going to be and it's unlikely to be a school in this country, but it's likely to be in a shopping centre.
Iconic site.
An iconic site where there will be security staff available.
Yes.
You can only hope that you've got a former member of the police or military who's got a modicum of sense when it comes down to, but they don't pay sufficient money to attract the right people half the time. So why load this responsibility unless you're going to reward them? If we had an active shooter at Blue Water or Westfield or one of those, the police, it's totally on the bare bones of the police to deal with it, and the ambulance service. When in fact, if you've got security members of staff that are trained in, taking people to one side, dealing with any injuries, helping out, and understanding what the police are going to do.
Yes.
The police are coming through the door and, they've got these weapons with them. This is what you expect. Get behind this counter. Go and, get the people out of the way. Do whatever you... But there's no instruction around that. It's like, well, where are the toilets, mate? That's as good as it gets.
And you're absolutely right. And this has been highlighted by John Saunders' inquiry. It's been around for a long time, since 7/7, etc. But, it's the therapeutic vacuum. It's the narrowing the care capability gap.
Yeah.
with lots of evidence provided, it's very obvious that members of the public, some of them will run, some of them will take heed of the advice, seat-tail height, etc.
Yeah.
But there will be some that run towards it, and there'll be off-duty police officers, etc., who will go towards the danger.
Yeah.
So we need to accept that, and then some of the recommendations from the Sir John's inquiry was to educate the public, go back to the schools and teach them appropriate first aid, not just generic, but stuff like that. So that's been ongoing. But I take on board what you're saying with the SIA, but they have been directed by Sir John Saunders' inquiry to look at it urgently. And it's around bringing in a skill set that is appropriate to manage these types of incidents should that happen again. And it will do.
Of course it will.
It's only a matter of time.
Of course it will.
And so not only just train them, but also give them the equipment to deal with it. And you're quite right about, we expect them, it's got to be a voluntary thing, because they're not going to get paid £50 an hour to do this.
No.
It's somebody who wants to do something. And if they do volunteer, then we give them the appropriate skills and training and qualifications. And you know what? I'm involved with a client at the moment who oversees Battersea Power Station, for example.
Yep.
Iconic site. Do you know what? Their training, they've brought me in to do the training, and it's phenomenal. The support that they do, the development of that, they're starting to look at stretchers because the recommendations are from the SIA, from the St John's. And so there's a lot of innovation within the security sector to really take this forward. But the SIA, I don't know what they're doing at the moment. They've been told about this last year, so hopefully they will look at this urgently and start to develop some sort of response to it.
Yeah, only time will tell, mate. It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you, and I've really enjoyed our chat. But I give everybody this opportunity before I conclude any interviews. Is there anything you'd like to add, alter, or correct in relation to the statement that you've made today? See, I told you, didn't I?
Probably loads.
well, I
know
can.
how editing goes, so there you go.
Yeah, I can see that. In the long term, there'll be opportunities where I'll be calling you up and saying, "What do you think about this?" And we'll have a 10-minute chinwag around that. But I take that's a no comment, and
it's fine, mate. Yeah, crack on, love it. Having the opportunity to chat with you and engage is just wonderful. And for me, if it gets the word out to lots of people about medical training, and then great, it saves lives at the end of the day. So fantastic.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we can catch up and have a beer in the city at some stage.
Yeah, absolutely right. Or when you're down there, or I come up to the Two-Tone Cafe.
Two-Tone Cafe. Yeah, we've got to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bloody hell.
I'll include all of your links, if you can let me have them. I'll include all your links in the body of the text so that the public can find it, business people, etc. And I'll send you the link to our services site, which is free of charge. And you can join X-Job Services for nothing, just to promote your business within the wider field.
Okay.
All right. So that's
lovely.
That's what we do.
That's really great then. There's obviously a few people who are starting to retire this year. I'll link them into you. Yeah,
perfect. I mean, we do the recruitment, and we've got a services site as well, which is a repository for nice people, former police and military, people with their independent businesses like you that don't get the exposure. And people come to our central repository and they'll say, we're running an event, or we need a trainer, and they'll have a selection of people that they can choose from, and they'll go through the process, and the best person wins. So, all right. So we'll do all that. But listen, I've had an absolute ball talking to you. I've had a laugh.
Likewise.
The technical hitches we can overcome.
And we did. Yeah.
Keep safe, keep busy, and I hope it goes well for you overseas.
Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate the support, the time, meeting you. I can't wait to get together and have shoot the shit about some music over a beer. It'll be brilliant. So, long may it continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keep in touch, mate, and I'll speak to you very soon.
All right. Keep safe, mate. Have a nice weekend.
God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.